Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Arkham Speedrun Chats. I still haven't settled completely on the name, but in this series, it's a discussion-based series where I am joined by someone. Yes, it has been Daniel for 3 of the videos now. Don't worry about that. I'm having a great time talking with Daniel about things. But with the idea is that we have a topic, and we have 10 minutes to talk through that topic, and then when that timer is done, we're going to just stop. I want to just say thank you for your support on this series so far. I know it's been a while since I've done the other one. That's just because of Drown City spoiler season and all that. Like, there's just been a lot of other fun Arkham content to make, which has been really cool. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the topic on the screen, and then I'm going to start the timer, and then you are going to take it away, and then I'll join in the conversation once you're done your little intro. And our topic for this one is Skids O'Toole's ability outclassed? So I'll start the timer and go for it.
Okay, so I think if you'd asked me this question a few years ago, before Scarlet Keys probably had released, I would have said, yes, the ability is kind of bad these days. But I'm here to make my opening arguments about why I think it's actually quite good, and one of the stronger abilities that you can get on an Investigator card with the whole card pool. So extra actions, I think, in general, are quite strong in this game. You get kind of a version of this in a lot of different Investigator abilities, but they're kind of automatic or they're limited in some way. Skids has the ability to spend 2 resources and get that extra action to do whatever he wants. I think, again, some historical context here. At the beginning of this card, or the beginning of the game's lifespan, Skids was spending 2 resources to do what? He already wasn't doing much with those 3 actions in the first place. The 4th one was to try to pass a test he failed. Like, that's not that good of value. These days, though, there's 2 things that have changed. One is that money is not hard to come by, especially in the rogue class. There are so many really, really good cards that you can put in your deck that get you a lot of resources, even from the beginning of the game. So things like Embezzled Treasure lets you start with a bunch of resources. You can play cards like Faustian Bargain or Bank Job to give yourself a huge influx. And this ability isn't that hard to trigger. Even if you don't want to use it right away, you should stockpile resources kind of no problem. So that's one thing that has changed. There's just so many other good cards that give you an influx of resources. Red Clock is another one that just in itself gives you extra actions too, but the free money all the time is quite good. The next part is, I don't think that the actions you take as a rogue are low value anymore. It might have been that they kind of were before. The stat line here on Skids is not great. What are you doing with the 3 intellect or the 3 combat? Not a whole lot, but these days a flat stat line is fine. You can overcome this with a variety of cards. Just thinking about the money itself, you have well connected, right? Yes, that's one test, but the level 3 version lets you ready it and take another test at probably a fairly high value. Even if you don't want to use those other numbers, the 3s in intellect and combat, you can make use, I think, in Rogue pretty well. But you can also focus on agility in Rogue with cards like Thieves' Kit and British Bulldog, and you can make that number pretty high with a lot of other cards, like the Moon Tarot, for example. So you can take 4, 5, 6 actions in a turn and make them pretty high value. They don't all have to be tests, though. They can be something like, well, moving. I think that's really versatile, depending on what's going on in a scenario. Or playing cards, drawing cards, dealing with other things that are not just a test, I think can be very helpful for Skids or anyone when you're playing a particular scenario. So that just leads me to my last point, that I think on the face of it, this looks like, why do I need this extra action every now and then? But when you're playing a real campaign, a real scenario, I constantly think, man, I wish I had just one more action this turn. And I don't think that's like a deficit of like your deck in general, but rather just the way scenarios play, where if only I had one more action, we could all move to the steps to Yoth and complete this round, rather than waiting a whole nother round to go to the next act. Things like that, you don't really notice until you're playing the game. So I find that this is very useful. You don't use it all the time. I think that's a mistake to use it every round, but at some point you probably could. And let's just finish up by saying his Elder Sign gives you resources you can funnel right into these extra actions. So I think just a generic extra action whenever you actually need it, and you've got a little bit more skill with how that's useful, becomes a lot stronger as your card pool gets better, as your deck gets really good. The rogue card pool in general is just super strong. So you can make those actions pretty high value these days.
Yeah.
All right.
So I think a good place to start with this is, it's even been said on our channel, sometimes we say some things that are tongue-in-cheek that sometimes people take seriously. We said in the past, like, you wouldn't play Swift Reflexes, so why would you want Skid's ability? And I don't think that is a true statement, like, when you actually strip it down, because the idea is that Skid's ability doesn't cost a card, right? So already it's suddenly better. And I agree very much with your point that resources are a lot easier to come by in the rogue class than they were previously. I think that's like something that is just absolutely true with how the card pool is. And with Skid's ability, I look at a lot of things where I'm like, with these 2 resources, would I want to pay a 2 resource tax to move, right? Or would I want to pay a 2 resource tax to do another activation on my Thieves Kit? And I mean, luckily, most Thieves Kits will pay you back if you're building around it, which is really nice. And the answer to that, most of the time, with how I view Skids O'Toole, the answer is still, I think it's less no than it was previously. Yeah. But I think that it's one of those things where when I'm taking those Skids actions, I just like, my money is better spent elsewhere. However, with all that said, in all fairness to Skids O'Toole, when Travis recently played him, you're 100% right that the resources that you spend to do those actions are usually worth it when you are doing them, right? Just having that extra action on lock when you want to do it is very much worth those 2 resource actions. However, with that said, to go with the comment here is like, is Skids O'Toole's ability outclassed? I think for me personally, the answer is still yes, because that's a different question than, is Skids O'Toole ability bad? Because I don't think his ability is bad, right? I think like you bring up a lot of use cases for why it actually is a good ability, but the thing that I still can't shake when I look at Skids O'Toole's ability is that other investigators just get like an extra action easier, right? Because the concept is that a lot of investigator abilities are just extra actions, right? So, like, yes, he has that versatility where you need to, you can do whatever you want with it. That's a huge plus. Like, that's absolutely true. But, like, other people, like, let's just point at, like, Trish Scarborough or Tony Morgan, they get an extra action for just doing what they are already doing, right? And their extra action also comes without any sort of test on it. They do have some strings attached. Trisha has to be investigating with an enemy at her location, and Tony Morgan needs to be fighting, but that's not really a string for Tony. But like, it's one of those things that I think that if you just look at like the hit rate, the outclass is still there, but I think that's a different question than, is it bad? Because I think the outclass kind of has like a flavor that is like, is this actually bad? And I don't know if that's necessarily true.
So I'll just have a short rebuttal in our last 2.5 minutes, which is, I totally agree. Like, if you look at Tony Morgan, right, he gets the 6 actions for free at the beginning of the game, and he might get more. And they're high value because that's what he's doing already. The question is this ability outclassed in the sense of, if I'm just using my resources to do, I don't know, one thing, fight, then yeah, I want to be playing Tony. If I'm just using my extra actions to do the same thing every single round, I think then you're not using Skids' ability the investigator card in the way that he's probably meant to be, which is sometimes I'm using my extra action to do an evade. Sometimes it's to do a clue. Sometimes it's to deal with an enemy in a different way. And the more that you spread that out, the more value you're getting from Skids, where Tony and Trish, I mean, they're great investigators. Yeah. I'm not going to argue that they're on the same level as Skids. They're way better. But what they're asking you to do is much more focused, which can be exactly what you're trying to get out of your deck and the game. The game does want you to be very, very focused sometimes. But Skids is saying, you know what, though? I could do all of those things with just the same card pool and the same investigator card. I don't need to worry about passing around the necessary things to do on every turn to other people whose job that is if things aren't going well. So it's kind of the question of like, he's doing a lot of flex work with that stat line and with that ability, which makes him, both good and also maybe you don't get the highest peaks that you do for some of the other investigators. That said, like I said, the card pool for Rogue is so good that I do think he can do anything, and it doesn't feel quite as much of a cost. But yeah, I mean, would I rather use the ability or count on the ability for some other investigators who just get something automatically? Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that's what it really comes down to, where if you actually like view Outclass as a bad thing, because I think you're 100% right. If you change the perspective of, do you want a hyper-focused ability or a flexible ability, that really just changes also the idea of what is Outclassed. Like, are we comparing Outclassed to, like, if we even look at like Jenny versus Skids, like the idea is that they're each spending, like, they're getting 2 resources to use on something in a different way, right? Like Skids is just putting his resource down on an action. Does that mean that, like, it's a complicated thing, but I think you're 100% right that flexibility is something that we need to put in Skids' favor compared to other things that might be compared to Outclassed. Kind of lost the sauce a bit on that last bit, but the timer was in my head, so I'll blame the timer on that last one.
Yeah, I could have rewritten this to be like Outclassed compared to, say, the parallel version or something like that. But I think we had a good conversation about the what is on the front side of the card compared to other investigators too.
Yeah,
and what does that mean?
As for people who wanted to see us disagree, unfortunately, we're still pretty polite about it.
Oops.
Yeah, I mean that's just the nature. Why stress so much about it? But that was a great topic. But we'll see you all for the next one. Make sure to go follow Quick Learner if you're not already following. Thanks for joining me for this video. And thank you everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and we will do more of these. I know I said in the past that I wanted to do these weekly, but honestly, I've been getting a lot of ideas for content, so I'm not gonna let those ideas sit. We're just gonna keep making Arkham content for all of you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good one, and as always, GG's.